gain, but they tried. They were looking for a Savior, a human being, who was going to come and lead them to a victory over their oppressors. One that would lead them by the sword and give a victory and put them in the position of dominance on this earth. This is what they were looking for. And in their language, he was called Messiah. The Messiah, or Messiah. He was to be born of a virgin, according to some. Some said it was just a young lady, but it's immaterial. It's in the book of Isaiah. What we'll say from the Muslim point of view is, of course, that it was Jesus. And he did come, and he was the Messiah, and he was the one who was predicted. And when Jesus came, as we heard from the Quran, he essentially said the same thing. Well, now when I'm going to talk to the Christian, I have to be fair. Let's go look in his book and see what it says. That's fair. After going through a very strange first chapter of Matthew, and I say strange because in essence, it's trying to prove the genealogy, the whole entire first verse or first chapter in verses is dealing with the genealogy of Jesus. Genealogy means who's your father, who's his father, who's his father, and who's his father. That's problematic considering Jesus didn't have any father anyway. That's why I said it's kind of a confusing situation. But leaving that aside, let's move forward a few chapters and let's look at chapter 5 in the book of Matthew. What we're going to discover is a statement in verses 17 through 19 that very much fits well with the topic that we're talking about tonight. Because what it says, more or less the translation, that Jesus told them what the greatest commandment was. Somebody would ask him, what's the greatest commandment? What's the message? To know, O Israel, the Lord your God is one Lord. And you have to love him with all your heart and all your mind and all your strength. And a commandment like unto it, to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, if we went back and looked in chapter 6 of Deuteronomy in the Old Testament, Moses said exactly the same words. So this was not a new commandment, nor was the second commandment that he mentioned here a new one, because they're identical. No difference. So we can establish, at least in part from these, and they're not taken out of context. This is in the context. And we can line it up exactly with what we found in the Quran. Now the only thing left is to discover about who ism Ahmed. And I'm going to say in English it's going to sound similar, but it means different. Who is this Ahmed? What remains of the New Testament, and there were so many versions, there have been many versions of the New Testament, especially before the Nicene Council. But after the Nicene Council, the Catholic Church canonized certain documents and said, this is what it's going to be, and there's no more discussion about it. Which didn't hold up long, because a few hundred years later, they did hold another council, and they took out the book of Revelations, and then another one they put it back in, and then another one they took it back out, put it back in, and so on. The book that's held by the Protestant Christians is very similar to the Catholic version, except that it's missing about 7 books. When the Protestants broke away from the Catholic Church, they dropped out 7 of the books. But the main ones that I've been referring to are still there, so it doesn't affect what I'm telling you tonight. It certainly affects how they look at their own religion, but that's not our point. In the, I'm going to use the words New Testament or Injil, or what survives today, these are actually not from Jesus. So we can't say Jesus really said it. What we have is documents that say that they have come from somebody who knew somebody who heard somebody say something, basically. And to quote Bart Ehrman, who happens to be one of the top scholars, at least in popularity today, in his books, Lost Christianities, Lost Scriptures, and Misquoting Jesus, I will tell you what he said based on his work with the actual manuscripts. He said, in reality today, we don't even have a copy of 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 anything original from anything out of the New Testament. He was very emphatic about that. I wrote to him an email, invited him to come and be with me on stage. I was going to be close to his place in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and he refused and said that he wasn't interested in religion anymore. He was very disappointed in religion in general, and he chooses not to believe anymore. And this is not something that I want to see happen to the Christians or the Jews or the Muslims, and that is not the purpose for bringing up the subject. In fact, the opposite is true. What I'm looking for is a chance to discuss something and show you that even though you may not have an original, you may not have a proof for what you're saying, consider this, because it agrees with what I just told you, and there isn't any doubt about this book amongst any of the Muslims on the planet. We have 1.5 to 1.7 billion Muslims who recite this in the Arabic language to some extent every single day. It still exists, it's still here, and it's coming from the same source, the same God, the same message. But let us return now just for a minute and look again in the Gospel of John, chapters 14 and 16. And this, I'm not going to quote the whole entire chapters to you, but just to let you know, it gives reference to Jesus talking about leaving his people. And that he's going to come back to them. He's going to leave, there will be an interim, and then he will return. During the time that he's gone, another prophet like unto him will come. And he even says, now this is a translation not from the Aramaic or Hebrew, but rather from a Koine Greek translation of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. But still it said, his name will be the Spirit of Truth. He will be called the Spirit of Truth. One of the names of the Prophet Muhammad was what? As-Sadiq. He was the truthful. Exactly what was mentioned in the Bible. This was one of the names of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Another word from the Koine Greek is parakletos. And I don't even know if I'm saying it right, because it's a dead language now anyway. Which means an advocate, a counselor, or a comforter. More likely like a counselor or comforter or advocate. Always spoken the truth. You're a person who has helped reconcile families, bringing the families back together. And one who is always trustworthy. And these are names that he's known by. The trustworthy, the honest, and the reconciler. The same names are mentioned here in this chapters 14 and 16. But parakletos is a very long word if you see it in any of the documents that we have. And if you're not real clever with Koine Greek, you could mix it with another word. It's only one letter off. That in my Koine Greek dictionary that I have with my Strong's Concordance of the Bible, it says it means the praised one.